Okay, let's get started, shall we? Anna, you nod? Okay, cool. Then let's get started with a proper warm welcome. Welcome everyone to this international webinar for SAICM National Focal Points and other stakeholders in the SAICM community. A webinar on the Gender in Chemicals Roadmap, how to integrate gender in national chemicals management. We all hope that you are all in good health and doing well under these difficult circumstances we are experiencing under the pandemic, and we're very happy that you're joining us today. My name is Minu Hemati. I'm a co-founder and associate of the MSP Institute, Multi-Stakeholder Processes for Sustainable Development. I'm advising the project Gender Chemicals Roadmap and will facilitate our webinar today. The MSP Institute is a small charitable association based in Berlin, Germany, dedicated to supporting high quality dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders, stakeholder participation, and good governance. We've been working on gender in chemicals since 2017 with support from the German Federal Environment Ministry and the German Environment Agency, and have been active in the SAICM process since then. As part of our Gender Chemicals Roadmap project, we have invited all SAICM national focal points and other stakeholders from the SAICM community to present our roadmap tool and discuss the integration of gender aspects in national chemicals management. We had, I believe, 67 registrations for this webinar today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We are also recording this, so some people might access the recording. We're very happy about this interest, and we'll make the recording available on our website and our YouTube channel. And by the way, if you don't want to be seen in the recording, just switch off your video camera. Before we begin properly, I'd like to invite you to remove distractions from your desk, maybe quickly get some coffee or tea, and maybe also you want to take notes. We will make the presentation available, but maybe you want to have a pen and a piece of paper ready. Also, please switch off your microphones and keep yourselves muted unless you wish to speak, of course, so we can avoid any background noise and loops. For questions, we will use the chat function, and you can also raise your virtual hand. At the bottom of your Zoom window, quite in the middle, you find the icon for the chat. And that, if you click on that, that opens on the right-hand side, and you can indicate you want to speak, or you can raise a question, make a comment in the chat. You can also use the raising hand function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window, either under reactions or as a separate icon. And I'm not sure which Zoom version you have, you'll find it there. If you don't, Pia Zimanda, our student assistant, she's here today as our technical support. You'll find her in the participant list. You can also individually chat to her. And if you have a problem, let her know. So if you can't find that function, you can also just use the chat. So as I said, we're recording this session. If your connection isn't good, or if you don't want to be seen in the recording, just switch off your video. Otherwise, do keep it on, maybe during the discussion time at least. It helps us a little bit to be together and build a sense of community here. Thank you very much. Here's our agenda for today's session. We will start with the presentation of the Gender in Chemicals Roadmap, the roadmap itself and the workbook by Anna Holthaus, who's managing the project. We'll have a round table or an interview style round table with three representatives from the SAICM Secretariat. We have Jose, we have Susan from the BRS Secretariat, and Hans Christian from the German Environment Agency, and I'll introduce them properly when we get to that round of interviews. And in both cases, you have the opportunity for some Q&A with Anna and as well as with the three colleagues. We've planned an interactive exchange with you on integrating gender in national chemicals policy. We've prepared a few key questions, what we believe are key questions, and some virtual boards for taking notes and raising questions. I'll introduce that tool when we get to it. It's a mural, and we'll quickly show you how to use it if you're not experienced with it. Then Anna really wants to invite you to use the roadmap and share your experiences, and she'll spend a few minutes on that. And we'll close around 2:45, or whatever time that is for you, in about an hour and 40 minutes. We'll keep the Zoom open a little bit, just if we were in a formal conference or in a face-to-face conference, when we would get up and all move to the tea and coffee and start chatting a little bit. So we'll leave that open if you want to do some informal networking and chat with each other after the formal closure of the session. But before we start dive into the issues and Anna's presentation, we wanted to invite you to a brief poll and a few questions to you so that we get to know each other a little better and know who we are here together. The questions will show up right in your Zoom window, and Anna will start them now, and I hand you to Anna for this, right?
Yes, so welcome also from my side, and I will start or try to start the poll. It's not working at the moment.
You are the host, so you should be able to start it, or could Pia? Give us a second.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the first question. Thank you.
Yeah, because I can't see it. Okay.
I can see it. And the first question is, which stakeholder group do you belong to? You see it?
Okay, now I can see it. Yes.
Over to you.
Perfect. Yeah. So please choose which stakeholder group do you belong to, either national focal points, other government organization, IGOs, industry, science NGOs, or even other organizations. So I will let you 1 or 2 minutes to answer that question. Okay. So, okay, thank you. And I can see that most of you are national focal points. Some of you are other government organizations. Then we have some IGOs, some people from the industry, some NGOs, and also some others. But at this moment, nobody from science.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, so I will try to start the second question. Okay, and I hope you can see it now. The question 2 is, from which region do you participate? Do you participate from Africa, from America, Asia, Europe, or Oceania? Okay, so some last seconds to vote. Okay, thank you. So most of you are from Europe, and that's maybe depending on the time, I don't know. And some are from Africa, from America, from Asia, and that's really nice. And it's very good to have so many different regions here. Yeah, and so you can see it too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we have a last question. And the third question is, has the issue of gender and gender equality played a role in your daily work so far? Either often, sometimes, not much, or never? Some final seconds. Okay, thank you. So we can see that some people are often working with the issue of gender. Most of the people are working sometimes with the issue, and some people are not much working, but not much people are never working with the issue of gender and chemicals, and that's really nice. And we hope to push the issue more, and that you are all a little bit more often working on it. Okay, thank you. And I hand over to Mina.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna. This is interesting. And thanks particularly maybe to the Asian colleagues who joined us. For them, it is actually Friday evening. So that's commendable. Thank you very much. Before Anna gives her presentation about the Gender Chemicals Roadmap, the roadmap and the workbook that colleagues have developed, I'd like to introduce her properly. Anna Holthaus, she has studied environmental sciences and sustainability policy and has been interested in the linkages between gender and sustainability for a long time. Anna has been working with us at MSP Institute since 2018 as a project coordinator on the linkages between gender and chemicals, especially in the SAICM process. And she's recently started managing the Gender Chemicals Roadmap project, which she will introduce to you now. Now back to you, Anna, for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Mina. And I'm very happy that so many of you are interested in the issue of gender and chemicals and that you are here today. I would now like to introduce you to our project Gender and Chemicals Roadmap in more detail in the next round about 15 minutes. So my presentation is divided into 4 parts. First, I will give you a short introduction into our project. Then I will explain you in more detail the project's background. After that, I will dive deeper into our 2 publications, the Gender and Chemicals Roadmap and the Gender and Chemicals Workbook. And finally, I want to show you briefly how we want to implement first steps in Germany. So the full title of our project is called Gen Chem Roadmap, implementation of a gender roadmap in national chemicals management. The project started in April this year and is planned until the end of March next year, and is financially supported by the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety and the German Environment Agency. The purpose of the project is to promote sustainable chemicals management in Germany by reinforcing gender equality in chemicals management and reducing negative impacts due to prevailing gender inequalities in chemicals management. And the long-term goals of the project are therefore the systematic integration of gender, the equal participation of women, and the participation of gender experts in the national chemicals management. And we want to achieve this through the following main project activities. The publication of the gender roadmap, which is a guideline, especially for SAICM National Focal Points, plus the accompanying workbook, and a pilot phase in which first steps of the roadmap will be initiated and implemented in Germany. Okay, but what is the background of the project? And I'm pretty sure we all know the shocking fact from the Global Chemicals Outlook 2 that in 2016, an estimated 1.6 million people worldwide were sickened by chemicals, and that the global production of the chemical industry will double by 2030. And this shows a holistic transformation of the chemical sector and industry is urgently needed. Also in regard, of course, to climate change and biodiversity, and that this transformation has to take into account the social dimensions of sustainability. Otherwise, we can't really reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And gender mainstreaming is one important aspect of this, as gender inequalities in the use of chemicals are associated with negative impacts on human health and the environment. And this is because, on the one hand, chemical exposure differs due to social aspects and the possibilities for political participation and opportunities for shaping policies, differ between women and men due to social norms and gender roles. And on the other hand, chemical exposure often differs between women and men due to biological reasons between the sexes. And gender mainstreaming, as well as the development of gender expertise, is therefore necessary at all policy levels for effective policymaking. And gender mainstreaming is also demanded internationally with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and it is also increasingly implemented in other environmental areas such as climate change and biodiversity. Okay, and there's also the need for gender mainstreaming in chemicals management, and that was highlighted during a discussion on gender at the SAICM Community of Practice on SDGs in September last year. And there, 87.5% of the participants believed that gender inequalities in relation to chemicals exist in their countries. And the majority of participants considered the development of gender action plans and additional research to be very important. And in more than 50% of the countries of the participants, gender has not yet been taken into account in environmental and health policy. So this shows that the need for gender mainstreaming in chemicals management is there, but so far there are only a very few ideas and approaches for the practical implementation of gender mainstreaming in chemicals management, especially for the national policy level. But there is the WHO roadmap and the chemicals roadmap workbook, which has been published in 2017 and was discussed in the SAICM community as a very useful guidance document for SAICM National Focal Points. And maybe you've already worked with it. And following this, we developed the idea of a gender and chemicals roadmap for SAICM National Focal Points in 2020 in discussions with other SAICM stakeholders. And now, since today, the gender and chemicals roadmap and the workbook are available on our website as drafts for discussions. The Gender and Chemicals Roadmap is a very brief guidance with only 12 pages giving an overview of the main working steps. And the Gender and Chemicals Workbook is a much longer document with over 70 pages. It entails more detailed descriptions for the working steps, examples, lots of useful references, as well as checklists and some space for your notes. And to work with it, you can print it and fill it with your ideas, but we will also develop an online version in the next month to use it on your computer. And the workbook document will stay open as a draft for discussion so that we can add tools, examples from your countries, as well as lessons learned during the implementation in our pilot phase in Germany. And when our project is finished next year, we want to send you the final roadmap to all SAICM focal points. Both the workbook and the roadmap aim to break down the long-term project of implementing gender measures in national chemicals management into smaller steps. And for this, the roadmap and workbook are designed to be user-friendly and hopefully also inspiring with our colorful illustrations and our yellow national focal point who's working on the integration of gender. And the roadmap contains 4 main working steps, and I will introduce you to them briefly. So in step 1, we would like to invite you to learn more about gender and chemicals. And for working with the issue, it is important to familiarize yourself with the topic and to deepen your understanding for the main aspects, problems, and questions, so that you can explore why gender might be relevant to you and your work in your country. And the roadmap offers you a brief introduction on the interconnections of gender and chemicals, the biological and social aspects, and it underlines the importance of the gender perspective. And in the workbook, you'll find more detailed explanations and examples on the on the concept of gender, but also on the gender mainstreaming strategy and the interconnections of gender and chemicals. It gives you an overview of gender gaps and gender specifics in chemicals management, and lists a lot of useful resources to dive deeper into the topic. And additionally, it offers you some space for notes. Okay. Yeah. And step 2 is called initiate the process. Step 2 helps you to start with the integration of gender and to find supporters. Gender mainstreaming is a multi-stakeholder cross-cutting task, and that is why it really doesn't make sense to do it alone, and it's better to have a working group. And therefore, the roadmap explains you briefly 3 main steps to initiate the integration of gender. First, how to establish a working group. Second, to create space for gender-sensitive collaboration. And third, to develop an understanding of the problem situation. And in the workbook, you will find various useful methods for these main steps, like how to conduct a stakeholder analysis, to find supporters. There's an example of an agenda for a first group meeting, some facilitation techniques for more gender-sensitive collaboration, methods for brainstorming and defining your problem area, additional space for your notes, and a participant list for your supporters and group members. Okay, and step 3 is then the main gender analysis. And step 3 gives you an overview how to implement gender mainstreaming as a cross-cutting task on the structural and on the content level in national chemicals management. And along 5 main action areas, which are policy integration, gender-related data and information, capacity building, institutional coordination, and financial resources, the roadmap offers you several working steps and key questions for the gender analysis. And these are, for example, is gender mentioned in the principal documents on chemicals policy in your country? Are changes in health and well-being tracked across all social groups and all genders? Are key actors aware of the gender aspects of chemicals? Is there regular interaction between relevant ministries? And is incorporating gender a criterion for the allocation of public research and project funding? But we are aware that mainstreaming gender is a complex and long-term task. And that's why we advise you in the workbook to focus on 1 or 2 chemical sectors or problem areas in your country. For example, on pesticides, on textiles, pharmaceuticals, electronics, or plastics first. And to divide the work in your group of supporters, because otherwise it would be much work. And therefore, the workbook offers you fillable tables to define priorities and responsibilities for each action in your group and to make notes during the analysis of the current status and potential activities. And step 4 offers you one of the best known tools to provide a deeper gender analysis of a specific policy measure or project, and to assess if this policy measure or project is gender neutral, or if it promotes gender equality, or does it even reinforce gender inequalities. And this tool is called Gender Impact Assessment, in short GIA, and we adapted it to the thematic field of national chemicals management. And the roadmap lists briefly the main working steps of such a gender impact assessment, plus key questions regarding the specific policy measure, like will gender-based health risk be reduced by the measure? Will the unequal distribution of income between women and men change? Will the unequal use of time between women and men change? Are there gender-specific consumption patterns that need to be considered? Or does the intervention take into account different education levels of your target groups? And to work through these questions, the workbook explains the gender impact assessment method in detail, and offers space for notes for each working step and key question, as well as a chat box to assess the results. Additionally, you will find further information and tools in our workbook. There is a brief guidance how to handle main difficulties in the gender mainstreaming process. There are some basic gender indicators for project design. There is a glossary of terms, additional references of guidance documents and toolkits, and some suggestions how you can share your experiences, plus additional space for your notes. Yeah, and so that was our first glimpse into our Gender and Chemicals roadmap and the workbook. You will find the drafts for discussion online on our website, gender-chemicals.org, and my colleague Pia, she will put the direct link in our chat now. So take a look. I hope it is useful for you, and we would be very happy to receive your feedback on it.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this comprehensive and, of course, compressed presentation. Because as you mentioned, the workbook is over 70 pages, and it's like, whoops. But it's quite loosely packed, and it has a lot of tools, references, and space for your notes, and so on. So it's really something that is supposed to be practical, to be taken into hand, and choose the steps that make sense for you and that are appropriate for you, and help you like quite a detailed practical guidance. So that's also why we're very happy to receive feedback, and if you try it and try some of those things and share your experiences, we're certainly interested. We're all on a learning curve with this, but you might have immediate questions of clarification. There was one already in the chat about the publication year. So final will be in March 2022, but the roadmap and as well as the workbook will stay available beyond that. Of course, in electronic format, and as Anna mentioned, it will be an electronic format, a PDF that you can use on your computer to write in, so you don't have to print it if you can't or if you don't wish to. So any other questions of clarification or things that you say, well, I didn't quite get that, or how does that work, are welcome right now before we have the more in-depth discussion in a bit. Is anybody who would like to raise a question of clarification? Let us know. You can raise your hand using the icon at the bottom of your Zoom window, or use the chat. I'll give it a minute. Otherwise, we would move on and hear experiences from our colleagues. Yeah, I think we'll move on. Yeah. Yeah.
If there is no other question of clarification, I can shortly tell you a little bit about the pilot phase in Germany. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so yeah, we also want to try to implement first steps of the roadmap in a small pilot project in Germany together with Hans-Christian Stolzenberg and the German SAICM Focal Point, who is also here today. And therefore, we've already conducted step 1 and step 2 of the roadmap. We did a comprehensive stakeholder analysis in June and invited various German stakeholders from science, from other ministries, industry, and NGOs to a first exchange meeting in July. And at that meeting, we brainstormed and discussed together about main problem areas of gender and chemicals in Germany. And we asked for support of the participants for the next implementation steps. And in autumn, we plan to have an internal meeting to start with step 3 of the roadmap, which means to define one problem area we want to focus on. And in the time between October until March next year, we want to conduct the gender analysis, step 3, and the gender impact assessment, step 4. And yeah, we hope that in spring, next year, we will have first results, and we will share it with you and the SAICM community, and of course, within the workbook document. Okay, so if there are no further questions, then I can just then say thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, let's work together on a gender responsive national chemicals management. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I apologize. I actually cut you off before you were talking about the steps that we're taking together with the German Environment Agency, the UBA here in Germany, with the steps that you just outlined. Thank you very much. So again, if there isn't any question of clarification right now, I don't see any right now.
Sorry, just to get it clear with the years on the last slide, you meant spring 22, right? But we started already last year. Is that true?
No, sorry.
Oh my.
There was a mistake. We started this year, and we will finalize the project next year.
Yeah. I several times get shocked how quickly I get older, but it's not that. Thanks.
No, Hans Christian, it's not quite 2026 yet. Anyway, I also feel that during these COVID times, and you kind of, you're only working with the screen, you kind of lose your sense of time. At least that's what's happening to me sometimes. Well, thank you. So the final version will be available in March 2022. I think that's next year. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Well, with that, I'd like to move over to our roundtable with 3 guests. As Anna explained, the integration of gender into national chemicals management is important for developing a sustainable sector, sustainable chemistry, and for leaving no one behind. But gender mainstreaming in practice actually is a very complex task, and we are all just in the beginning. Hence, the roadmap and the workbook with some of what we hope are some of the key steps that we have identified. But there are other experiences and lessons learned and other activities that are helpful in this regard. And that's why we invited José de Mesa Alcalde, Susan Wingfield, and Hans Christian Stolzenberg to join me in a brief round of interviews about questions around integrating gender into national chemicals management. And I'd like to, if we could show the slide with the 3 kind of members who are seated around this virtual round table. Thank you very much. I'd like to start and go with the first question to José, and I'd like to introduce José before I ask him the question. José de Mesa Alcalde from the SAICM Secretariat. José is an agricultural engineer with 20 years of experience in the UN Environment Programme. He worked for the Montreal Protocol in Latin America and the Caribbean from 2003 to 2009. Then he moved to UNEP headquarters in Nairobi and served in the major groups and stakeholders branch. And since 2015, he's been based in Geneva at the Chemicals and Health branch. My question to you, José, of course, is about gender and SAICM. What has been done so far? And maybe you can recall some of the activities and tools that the SAICM Secretariat and the process has developed. José? Is he here?
Yeah, sorry about that. Now you can hear me. Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you, Minu, and thank you also to Anna for the presentation on the roadmap you just published. It's good to see that there's many areas of work that you are putting there that are the same that we've been working on. So that means I think we are following the right direction, and we are adding forces between the different organizations. And I guess we have to continue and maybe go deeper into the same ideas. But let me now focus a bit on my wording. I think I'll be brief because maybe I can start by saying that in SDGs, the SDGs try to actually overcome all these inequalities that we have among population groups, especially women and children. And SDG 5, as you know, aims to achieve gender equality specifically. So what UNEP does is addressing the links between environment and gender compared to what other agencies can do. And in terms of UNEP, before going to SAICM, just to say that we have a working partnership between IPEN, the International POPs Elimination Network, and UNEP. It's a working partnership on gender which focuses especially on raising awareness, promoting women's engagement and leadership, decision-making, and contributed to SAICM EPIs and SDGs. And this last bit is the one that we incorporate into SAICM. And in SAICM, concrete activities that we are doing in SAICM gender, maybe the first thing to say is that we don't have like formally a mandate to work on gender activities. We work actually based on a program of work approved by SAICM 4. These are our main governance meeting. So this one is back older from 2015. And as I said, it doesn't have a specific mandate on gender. Hopefully we might have it in the future, but not today. But nevertheless, we have been doing some activities, especially on emerging policy issues and issues of concern. I am not sure if you are familiar with EPIs, but those are, as the name says, emerging policy issues that are coming that are maybe not addressed by any specific agency. And so UNEP and SAICM works on this. Maybe to list them very quickly: then pain, chemicals in products, hazardous substances within, so e-waste, nanotechnology, EDCs, endocrine disruption chemicals, EPPPs, environment persistent pharmaceutical pollutants, perfluorinated chemicals, and highly hazardous pesticides. Maybe just to say regarding UNEP that also the other environment conventions like Basel Convention, Rotterdam Convention, Stockholm, Minamata, etc., they are also incorporating gender more and more into their policies when talking about UNEP in general, but now more focusing on SAICM then. The work we have done falls under the knowledge management component of the SAICM GEF project. So SAICM has a GEF project on global best practices on emergency chemical policy issues. And the knowledge management component is where we have done work in gender. So out of this 4 community of practice, the knowledge management component, what it does is create community of practice in which we have like a repository of knowledge and also best practices, and where many stakeholders is a platform that facilitates that many stakeholders can create linkages and share information, etc. So among these, we had 2 discussions related to gender. One was titled Brainstorming Implementation of Gender Mainstreaming into National Policies, so very related to what we are talking here. And the second one, Gender and Sound Management of Chemicals and Waste, Gender and the SAICM Emergency Policy Issues. The discussions of this community of practice are online in our web and can be checked. To finalize, we have also produced a report called Gender Review Mapping with a Focus on Women and Chemicals, Impact of Emergency Policy Issues and Relevance of Sustainable Development Goals, was published this year by SAICM. So this is also available the web. As you can see, it's all the time related to EPIs. Just to put a very quick example, the exposure to high levels of heavy metals in the life cycle of electronics are especially affecting women, because this is the primary force of labor in Latin America. So e-waste is affecting women. So this is one of the APIs. A second quick example, lead in paint is also affecting gender because it's very toxic to pregnant women and child. So this is why APIs are directly and very much affected by gender policies. In moving forward, what we can say is that we acknowledge inputs on gender to stress net aspects in the virtual working groups that we have had earlier this year. US SAICM Focal Points have been informed that we have had a series of virtual working groups, and especially on the virtual working group on governance and targets, there has been this topic of gender coming, and it's been integrated into the discussion, and hopefully into the political discussion. So there are additional other opportunities to strengthen focus on developing, collecting, and analyzing gender disaggregated data. This also has been mentioned by your roadmap at the beginning, and indicators and other information to support decision making also related. So this is what I can say regarding what we've been doing on gender in SAICM, and hopefully been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. When you initially said, well, we don't really have a mandate, and then you actually reported quite a bit of work that is going on, but also the ongoing discussions in the Beyond 2020 process. And maybe from our side, we would say the hope that there will be a mandate, so that maybe even more work can be done, data to be generated and made available, tools and so on. But yeah, there's been a lot, and you can find all of this on the SAICM.org website. For those of you who are not immediately in the SAICM community, which we don't know, all that Jose has talked about, including the recordings of the knowledge management related meetings of the communities of practice, are available, correct?
Yes.
Maybe it's the SAICM.org website, and then there's a specific URL for the communities of practice. I'd just like to ask Anna or Pia maybe to copy that in the chat as well, make it easier for people to find. Okay.
What I can do for you is also copy the link of these discussions on community of practice, gender, the two direct links. I can do that now.
That would be great, yeah, because what comes in the chat we will also include in the documentation of this meeting. So all of that makes it easier to find the things that might be useful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll turn to the second person sitting at the round table, the virtual round table, Susan Wingfield from the BRS Secretariat, and I'd like to introduce her as well. Susan is a program management officer in the governance branch of the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. Her responsibilities include the facilitation of 2 partnerships under the Convention on plastic waste and on household waste, and coordination of the work of one of the Convention's subsidiary bodies. In addition, Susan also works as the gender focal point for BRS. Gender mainstreaming has been an essential issue in the BRS Convention for many years, and I'm sure we can learn a lot from the experiences there. So Susan, the question of course to you is, what are the experiences with working on gender in BRS and with integrating gender at the national policy level? Susan.
Thank you very much, Minu, and thank you for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be here. Firstly, to hear, all these updates, appreciate Jose's update on what the SAICM Secretariat are doing. Also really appreciated Anna's presentation on the chemical roadmap and the workbook, which I think is going to be an excellent tool to help parties, focal points implement or mainstream gender at the national level. So, and I hope you don't mind, I might be also referring to that quite extensively in any gender training I do under the BRS Convention.
I don't mind at all.
So yes, very much appreciated. But just to start with talking about the work that the BRS conventions have done. Well, as you know, BRS, the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions are the chemicals and waste MEAs. So very much linked to the work of SAICM. I was pleased to hear that you mentioned the word already, mandate, because I think that is so important when starting to work on the issue of gender. And it's something that under the conventions we didn't have for a number of years. We actually, quite similarly to SAICM, started working on gender without a formal mandate from our parties, but really from a secretariat-driven initiative. This changed in 2017 when actually our parties adopted a decision on gender mainstreaming and really solidified the mandate for our work to continue. So when that decision was adopted at our COPs, it not only solidified, as I said, the Secretariat's mandate and to implement a gender action plan, which I'll come to more in a minute, but also, you know, requested action by parties to consider gender equality, gender mainstreaming, and national policy development, particularly as it relates to, of course, the chemicals and waste agenda. So that was really an important milestone under the conventions. We, of course, as a global secretariat, we assist all of our parties in fulfilling the provisions under the conventions. And of course the mandates or provisions of the decisions that are taken by the conferences of the parties. So we've had quite a detailed gender plan, particularly since 2017, to help parties implement gender at the national level. Mainly, of course, we're not ourselves going in at the national level per se, but we're really trying to equip our parties with the tools so that they can, you know, continue this work when they return home to their domestic settings. The main things that we've used within our gender action plan have been training and capacity building on gender. As I said, we've got a sort of first generation training program on gender mainstreaming, which is actually currently being updated into really a second generation. As I said, I'd like to bring the workbook and chemicals roadmap into that, if I may. But what we've found very useful there is to actually, we've trained those delegates who have attended our meetings, for example. So we've tried to integrate, you know, spreading awareness about gender issues and training on those aspects into already planned activities, for example. Often we, you know, resourcing can be quite tight unless you need to have specific budgets assigned for gender work. So we've really tried to piggyback off other initiatives there to get the work started, and that's been very successful. So far we've managed to train, well, we've provided the offer of training to all of our parties, to at least one delegate in all of our parties, plus our regional centres. So that's another aspect I want to emphasise, the importance of regional collaboration in this discussion. So those have been important areas of action for us. Also, we've been able to take, when it comes to the national level, a much more focused look at, well, so far it's only one country in each of the UN regions. So far we've looked at Bolivia, Kyrgyzstan, Nigeria and Indonesia, but we'll be adding 2 more countries this year to really take a very focused look at impacts on gender with respect to chemicals and waste management in those countries. Jose's already mentioned that, you know, these emerging policy issues, some of which are obviously crossing over very much into the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm agenda. For example, you know, e-waste management, for us, mercury contamination from small-scale gold mining. These are types of issues that we've seen highlighted through these gender case studies. And so that's been really important as well, to sort of, we're trying to facilitate work at the national level to really take a deep dive into the issues that are really impacting in a in sense of gender. And I think the workbook really outlines in terms of doing that assessment, national assessment outlines that very nicely as well. But I will wrap up. I guess there's thinking about, you know, what to be done nationally. And as I said, as a global sort of international secretariat, you know, I'm really interested actually to hear from those here today who are working nationally about their experiences in mainstreaming gender. But from what the feedback I've had from our parties is, you know, of course, don't underestimate the importance of that mandate, which I mentioned to start, ensuring that, you know, we're working across all stakeholder groups, opening up the dialogue with leadership and decision makers, and making sure that the concerns of both gender or different genders are integrated. And of course, the importance of focusing on issues of concern in the chemicals and waste agenda, whether that be, you know, asbestos, mercury contamination, hormone disrupting chemicals, so forth. And I also think it's worth, I don't know if any of the focal points here today do cut across and work on other MEAs, because I know there's a lot of experience within the MEA community or the multilateral environmental agreement community on gender and gender mainstreaming. So I really urge to look nationally at maybe some other counterparts in other areas of your ministry or other ministries. I'll leave it there. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Susan, for, you know, sharing what's been happening around BRS and what you've done and what's been useful, but also some really good advice, I think, in terms of the SAICM process as a whole, including the mandate and possible activities. But also I was thinking about our implementation trial in Germany, and some of what you said will certainly take to heart for that. And of course, you are very welcome to use and spread and adapt or whatever that workbook. It's certainly meant as an open source kind of tool. And we're happy to, you know, if there's anything else you'd like to discuss around that, we're very, very happy to do that. Thanks very much, Susan, for sharing these really experiences and pieces of advice. And as I said, you know, we'll take that to heart when we do the trial or first case study implementation trial in Germany, which brings me to talking to Hans Christian Stolzenberg and asking him. I'd like to introduce Hans Christian Stolzenberg from the German Environment Agency. He's a biologist and ecotoxicologist by background. And since 1997, he's been working for the Department of Chemical Safety at the German Environment Agency, or as we call it, UBA, where he became head of the International Chemicals Department in 2012. I do have an echo right now. I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe others could mute themselves and then, oh yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks. So in addition, Hans Christian is the German SAICM National Focal Point, and in this role, he accepted our invitation to try and implement the first steps of the Gender and Chemicals Roadmap in Germany. And as Anna outlined earlier, we're about to get there. The question, of course, Hans Christian, to you is which potentials or opportunities, but also which difficulties do you see with regard to implementation? What are your expectations? Hans Christian.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And yeah, maybe it was a lorry driving around here who made this echo right a few seconds before, but now it's away, and I hope that works. Yeah, happy to be here. It's really interesting. Even though after the previous speakers, I feel a little bit like a guinea pig, but of course that's what we have to do. And that's of course exciting, and maybe guinea pig is not a nice comparison, but of course we have to go ahead with doing it really, and that's interesting. And so that's the reason why I'm happy to be here, and why that we have this pilot project. That's good. And maybe I start off with a few points we have already at the Environment Agency. I should say It's a bit unusual being a SAICM focal point on this agency level. One of our main tasks is scientific policy advice. So we are doing not the policy itself. And of course, we need close cooperation when working with other ministries and so on, but that is an option and that works well. And as a scientific agency, it's of course interesting what we have at UBA on gender and chemicals aspects, which is, there are a few things, but not too many so far. That's remarkable. We support various women's organizations in their projects. We have some projects which show gender differences in chemical exposure. Of course, you need the data on aspects like that to really work in substance, so to say. Yeah, there are also some interesting surveys which show that, for example, which really provided evidence that average indoor concentrations of limonene, that's a perfume, odor-giving substance, are much higher in bedrooms of girls, because they obviously use more products like candles and fragrances and things with this not entirely benign substance. Also interesting is that we have awareness studies that show that women are more aware of health-related environment risks than men. That's also an interesting difference. And as a, this is some of these studies. There are not too much, and I have to emphasize there has to be done more to get really ahead with concrete work. Then, as a governmental agency on federal level, we have, of course, I should say, a gender equality strategy for staff. We have also a gender mainstreaming strategy for research projects, which foresees a gender impact assessment for newly designed research projects. And our gender equality officer is involved in things like that. Of course, with limited resources, not every project can be accompanied by the gender equality officer. And that's one of the challenges already. And of course, so far, regarding specific interlinkages of gender and chemicals, they are not yet tackled in a structured manner. And that brings me a little bit to the challenges or difficulties. Of course, a little bit it feels for most people when we go to the more concrete level of chemicals management, many people obviously feel it like an add-on. On the other hand, it should be integrated, and but as long as even some people don't see it as an issue at all in chemicals management, still that was surprising when we had this July meeting, that there were some reactions where people thought, what are you doing there? Is it really an issue? And of course it is. And that's, on the other hand, part of the difficulties that not all of the chemicals management community are that far that they really get the challenge. Another hurdle, and I feel often a little bit sister and brother in mind with our gender equality officer, and chemicals management itself is a cross-cutting issue, like gender mainstreaming is. And so you have to combine two cross-cutting issues, which is some challenge. And so that's the reason why I think we can overcome these challenges when we really do such pilot projects with specific topics in chemicals management, like we are planning, and that's why I'm so curious. And that's a learning by doing approach, I would say, or one could say walk the workbook, really applying it for a specific study so that you get from the conceptual level to the doing level. And we are not that far so far. So I'm curious as well what this pilot will bring. And there are, my group is a relatively small group. We are 360 plus people in the chemical safety department. So there's still some way to go to integrate also their work, the gender aspects, and I'm pretty confident that this pilot will help in doing so. And that brings me finally to the potentials of gender for chemicals management. On one hand, yeah, it's a little bit the mandate question as well. Of course, we have a mandate. We all have a mandate. A governmental agency like UBA, of course, committed to gender equality. It is an essential human right. And at least on paper, everyone committed to it, but doing it specifically and concrete work like chemicals management is a step further. And we should use this potential. And even the same importance says that I'm in the meantime very convinced that we achieve the goals of chemicals management, or we have this specific concept of sustainable chemistry, which tries to go further in the direction of sustainable development as an encompassing and overarching process. And that will be more successful, I'm convinced, if we integrate gender issues as well and aspects. I think we achieve the the chemicals management goals better if we look at the gender aspects properly. Anna, you mentioned in your presentation the 1.6 million illnesses. It's even deaths. It's much worse. It's only from a few chemicals. There are several tens of millions daily. So this is less than death, but worse enough. And there you see that often women are more affected than others due to gender aspects which have not yet been properly integrated in chemicals management. And that's, I think, a very important evidence to do both, to integrate chemicals management and sustainable development, and to properly observe gender equality aspects. Yeah, and what we see, that's another potential. What we see here, we get new networks. People who have not yet worked together see new opportunities to work together, and that's anyway a very important point, I would say. The true grit to cooperate, to really do things together and make it more specific. And we are quite some here, and we should become more and share our experience. And that's what we try now with this project. Walk the workbook, try out what we get with the pilot project, and then share our experience and learn from others where they succeed, and yeah, take the good points and move ahead. And that's maybe what I could say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hans Christian. Also, I find it remarkable you saying there are 360 people in the chemical safety branch in the Environment Agency. But as in many, many other countries around the world, the data about gender aspects in chemicals management aren't really there. So it has been a bit of a blind spot. And so that's one thing I'm taking from what you were saying, but also the focus on the two cross-cutting issues, and therefore the need to focus in on specific examples, specific substances, specific areas of work and life. And that's also something that I heard from Jose and from Susan, yeah, working with the specific examples rather than looking at the complex tapestry of it all, to make it practical, and then being able to share experiences. And when I listen to you, I feel this is really an issue where everybody can learn from everybody. north, south, east, west, whatever. And that's also an opportunity that isn't so, that we don't come across so often. So that's just my personal reflections, but I'd like to open it for questions that participants might have to any of the three or the three of them. I would think we can take a few minutes if you have questions of clarification or something that you would like to know from Jose, from Susan, from Hans Christian. Please let us know. Anja Klauk, also actually a colleague from Hans Christian, has put a comment in the chat. Thank you, Anja. Is there anybody who would like to raise a question or to have something clarified that Jose, Susan, or Hans Christian said? You can raise your hand or you can indicate in the chat. If not, I would like us to move to the interactive discussion that we had planned for this moment. And as I said in the beginning, we prepared a few questions that we like to get your comments, get your questions, get your views on. And to do that, we've prepared a virtual board like 4 flip charts. And I'd like to invite you to click on the link that Anna or Pia will share in the chat. It's a board on the Mural platform. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, but if you click on this link, you can enter the platform without having to register. You don't even have to say your name. You can just enter as a visitor. You can put your name or not, just as you wish. It's not downloading anything. It might take a few seconds to build on your screen, but it's not a very high density in terms of the data or the bandwidth that you need. And you will see when you enter this, you will be given or assigned a random animal, and that helps you navigate a little bit around the board. When you open it, you see that there's a number of individual boards. That's our virtual flip charts. And we've prepared some sticky notes or cards for you in different colors. You can navigate the board either by zooming in and out, and on the right bottom corner of your Zoom of the Mural window, you find a slider that you can use to zoom in and out. On the bottom right hand, upper right hand corner, you find an icon that's 3 dots and 3 lines that opens a table of contents. And when you do that, it opens on the right hand side. You can click on the individual chapters, and that will lead you to the individual kind of boards or flip charts that we prepared. And I'm going to share the questions in a second. What we're inviting you to do is that we spend a few minutes and you choose where you want to leave a comment or where you want to leave a question, and then we look at it together. If you have a problem with using the Mural, let us know, and we'll try and help you. But the 4 questions that we prepared that for us are important in terms of further developing and working with the roadmap and the workbook are: first, are there any activities in your country on the issues of gender and the environment in general, not just chemicals, and gender and the environment? As far as you know, if you can share experiences or best practice examples, or maybe something that didn't work, please do. You can also share a link or a reference to a case study or whatever it is. So if there are any activities in your country on the issues of gender and environment, this board with the yellow stickies is meant for you to share experiences or, kind of tag words, and you say this and this is going on. The second one with the kind of orangey sand-colored stickies on the left lower side. The question is, what are the biggest challenges for integrating gender in national chemicals management? In your own experience and from what you heard from the contributions so far, what do you think are really the biggest challenges, the key ones that we need to overcome? The third board with the purple stickies is what needs to be improved or added to the gender chemicals roadmap. So as far as you've seen right now, is there anything that we missed that we should really include? Unless we do, it's not really complete. So something that you would like to see added can also be a reference or a link. Please share there. And the fourth one with the green stickies is about which other tools or support would you need to integrate gender in your work as national focal point or in other roles as the case may be. If you want to leave a note or a comment or maybe a question, the way you can do this is you take one of those prepared stickies or cards in yellow, sand, green, purple, and you can just click on it and start writing on it. Or you go where you want your note to be, you do a double click on your touchpad or your mouse and create a sticky note yourself. Just experiment with it. You can't destroy anything. So you don't have to be shy. If you move things where there shouldn't be, no problem, we'll clean it up later. Just regard it like a pinboard or like a flip chart and write and leave notes as you see fit. And I'd like to invite you to spend a few minutes to do that. And then we'll look at what you wrote. So if you leave your notes on the boards, that's very welcome. Let's try that. If you have a problem using the board or leaving notes, let us know. Okay. I'll give you a few more minutes. And I see that the challenges board is most busy. Okay. Shall we look at it a bit? Or you need another minute? Is that so? Yeah, maybe 2 minutes. We'll have a bit of time. We're really keen on your comments, so thanks very much. Okay. So, shall we have a look at what you wrote? If I don't hear any protest, I would suggest that we just go through the boards. And if you wish to add more, please feel free, but also please feel free to comment orally if you wish. Yeah. At the moment, I'd say you could just unmute yourselves and speak. We're about 30 people, that should work. So I'd like to go to the first board, the yellow one, about any activities in your country on the issues of gender and the environment, sharing experiences or best practice examples. And somebody said here in Germany, there are now more studies on gender and climate change and transportation. If you have a link or a reference where we could find something. So this is on a different topic, but there is more, there's more research being done on this topic. Any comment? I'm not sure who wrote this. If you want to comment.
Yes, it was me. Yeah, there was a very, I think a 2-year study or something like that on gender in several environmental thematic fields. I think it was transportation, agriculture or food, and the third one. I think that is very interesting. I'm not really sure if this is also available in English, but I will have a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Then you could add maybe a link if you find something in English. Thank you. And somebody was referring to the fact that we have the International Climate Strike today as organized by Fridays for Future, and the fact that the younger generation is interested in gender and environment issues. Not sure who put that. Could have been Anna, but yes, she was, because I know she's active there. So that's also an opportunity, yeah, that it might be, we might find it easier to raise awareness in the younger generation about gender and environment issues. Anything else that you would like to raise here? Then leave a note or make a comment. Otherwise, I go to the challenges board, which is much fuller. So we see that you put things like it takes time. Indeed, it takes a lot of time. There's a lack of data, as some of the contributors in the session have pointed out. There's actually not much that we know with proper research data and gender and sex disaggregated and gender disaggregated data about gender aspects of chemicals management. Activating partners in specific cases for determined cooperation. Whoever wrote this, can you make a comment on what you meant?
Yeah, it was me. Yeah, I mean, That's always the issue. You think, I have the idea. There are so many possible cases in chemicals management. Let's say you are in a process of a restriction under REACH or whatever, and you wonder if you should integrate these. In that specific case, integrate the aspects, and then of course you always need some resources for that. If you are in a group in that process with 50 people and 59 people don't care at all, then it becomes difficult. And often this initial activation is a problem, and that's a little bit connected to this. In everyday work, mandate question. Who has a mandate? We all have the mandate because we all, at least on paper, committed to look also to these aspects, like many other integrated overarching aspects. But who takes then the lead, and how can he or she activate the others and say, come, let's go ahead? That's what I mean with this grit to cooperate, and that's often lacking. And that's why I experience it as challenge every time.
Thank you. Thanks, Hans Christian. Also, there is a reference to this issue of leadership in the one below, clarify mandates and leadership for implementation and specific cases of everyday work. So this kind of going ahead and saying, I'm going to start it is a challenge. Getting it done, case specific and concrete. Yeah. Beyond the complexity and of the discussion, getting it done. There's also somebody mentioned the national traditional culture and history. I don't know who put that, and if you would like to comment. That's okay. I have a rough understanding of what you mean, that we have cultures where, gender issues aren't necessarily easily digested or discussed, but traditional gender roles are quite firm, and there isn't so much of an openness to discuss these issues. And that would, of course, affect discussions on gender and environment, including chemicals, just as well. Yeah. There's also mentioning of obtaining adequate resources. So, it takes time is another one, and it takes time and it takes resources to do these things, to obtain the data, to take the steps of the workbook, to engage other people, to convene stakeholders, to workshop this, to do the analysis, to do the agenda impact assessment, and so on and so forth. And you might need additional resources to be able to do this. And then there's one on the right, in the bottom right-hand corner, the lack of coordination in the different projects and conventions as a challenge, because some of the work is going on in different corners, but we don't necessarily know. Yeah, I think Susan also made that point, that you can actually look across the silos and find interesting things and useful tools elsewhere. If you want to leave additional notes here, feel free. Yeah, Hans Christian?
Yeah, thanks. To get back on the resources, it's always what I'm wondering. Of course, you very nicely described what maybe also additional resources you need. But with my previous point, I also refer to the point that if you have 50 people who are doing something and 59 don't care about this aspect, it's often rather, that's what I mean, activating them for integrating this issue is even more important than beforehand getting new resources. Of course, you should be not too, it's not too easy, and that maybe if you never dealt with it, and especially here in the chemicals management, we mentioned earlier, you need data to start off in many cases to be aware of gender differences. You have to analyze them, and if you didn't do that before, then you need, of course, additional resources for that. But in many cases, I think the problem is that the existing resources are not properly activated for integrating this aspect, and I think that's also important. That's why I wanted to comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Hans Christian. Yeah, also thank you for the comment that you're making in the chat. And Susan, I'm not sure if you're still there, but I'd love to thank you for your contribution and for being there, and for sharing the links. We'll certainly include that in the documentation, and we hope to be working with you again sooner rather than later. Thank you very much, Susan, for being here. So I'm seeing the comments from Yahya in the chat, and then I'm a little challenged to also observe what's going on the mural. So you're doing, as you know, in a real workshop, it would be the same. I can't look at 4 flip charts at the same time. That's just the way it is. Okay. I'd like to look at the board with the question about the roadmap that Anna presented. If there's anything that you feel is missing or that needs to be improved or added. And we have 2 notes here. One is in developing countries, we need capacity building. And that's also something that Susan shared from the BRS experience. They did targeted capacity building. But I believe actually we need capacity building in most countries, and not just in developing countries about these issues, because there are very few who work on chemicals who are familiar with gender issues. That's at least our experience, which I think is a great opportunity to say we all need to learn. And then there's a note saying challenge in invisible area. I would need a bit of a comment to understand this well. Not sure the person who put the comment would like to explain it a little bit. It would be helpful. It's not a must. If you can, let us know. Yeah. Okay. We'll try and digest it. Anna?
Yeah, I am just thinking maybe it means, and I'm pretty sure that this is true, the more deeper structures of gender inequalities. And of course, this is often, communication or traditional roles and traditional beliefs. And I think it's really hard to work on these and to change that. But of course, it's important to have a look at it. And I think starting to think about gender and gender inequalities and structures, is a good start. And then you also begin to and start to think more about the deeper structures.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, Anna. It would help me what you said to understand that comment. Thank you. Thanks. Shall we move to which other tools or support would you need to integrate gender further in your work? That was the one with the green stickies in the right lower corner. And there's also a few. I do confess that I put a few myself because I had a few ideas when I was listening to the contributions earlier. But let me start here on the left-hand side. Need a special fund to implement it. Whoever put that, I'm going to just put it in the middle and add it to something that I put myself, a special fund for gender-related projects, ? Maybe that would be a good idea and create incentives. Not sure who else put this. Need a special fund to implement it. Okay. Please feel free to comment, yeah? And then there's a note saying partnerships including both gender experts and all actors concerned in a specific case. Good idea, yeah. That's, I think, in the roadmap, what we're trying to say is bring together a multiple stakeholder kind of core group to do this together, and add a gender expert. Thank you. Our SAICM National Focal Point mailing list for exchange of experiences, great idea. Or maybe add it to the communities of practice or some of the work that is done in one of the communities of practice on knowledge management, and continue. with sharing experiences with the gender roadmap. Hans Christian?
Yeah, I won't succeed in writing and speaking at the same time, but after I mentioned it in my interview, I think this tool of gender and impact assessments required, for example, for research projects or for other kinds of funding. That's probably a good tool. And yeah, after these two stickies with a special fund, at least we can say it's very useful to have a fund for such a project like this one. On the other hand, I think to integrate it in everyday work, it's more, yeah, it has probably more impact to require these gender impact assessments as a precondition for funding something, for a specific project or research project. That could help, and maybe someone who does not speak at the same time can take this note down.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to ask Anna or Pia maybe to add this. But I was thinking about it also when Susan was saying they conducted case studies in individual countries on gender and implementing gender mainstreaming on specific substances. That, you know, if we had a fund to support that, then it would be helpful to generate these cases.
And maybe I can add, of course, people are often annoyed if it's too bureaucratic and you have a long list of checkpoints and then you have to write something about the gender aspects of this very project. And I think it has to be combined, of course, with some offer to interaction, having a gender expert attends where you can discuss it. And then as soon as you start to really briefly discuss it and think it through, then it's really useful, I would say.
Thank you. Thanks. Best practice and award system would be something that would be helpful. Somebody suggested that. If you want to comment, let me know. And then actually my note was a workshop at ICCM 5 to kind of, you know, raise awareness and make it popular. And that was my note, and somebody added maybe together with UN Women, which would also be an opportunity to build bridges again with other groups and programs and organizations in the IGO system, in the UN system. So yeah.
And just to add on this idea, I know that in the CBD biodiversity process, they did such a workshop, I think with 40 or 50 people from the biodiversity process together with UN Women, and I think it was very successful.
Yeah, pulling in the expertise, yeah, with gender analysis, impact assessments, and so on. That might actually be helpful. Yeah, it is there, and so there's a lot I think that can be gained by looking across those silos and pulling in the expertise that is needed. Any other comment or question from anyone?
Yes, I saw, and I'm looking at the chart right now. Let me just come back to it, and I see a comment said a SAICM National Focal Point list for exchange.
Yeah.
So we actually have the SAICM Focal Point list published in our web. I invite all of you to go there. I can maybe send the link, direct link. It's in our web, but I can send the direct link to the chat. And I kindly ask you to check if the name is updated, because we can only update this when we receive an information of a change, for example. But we have all the countries there, and yeah, so the list and the contacts are there, so you can. There is already that list.
Thank you, Jose. So if you could share the link to that list here in the chat, that would be great. And Jose, you're asking that people have an eye on updating this, otherwise, you know, they can't be reached. But I think the suggestion was also to have a mailing list, like an email list that people can use to share information or ask questions or whatever. And I believe the communities of practice do have that, don't they?
The communities of practice are more thematic. So, but us as the Secretariat, I mean, one of our functions is obviously disseminate information, so we can actually reach in one email all the SAICM focal points. So that's feasible, and we are happy to disseminate any information that can come to us. Additionally, as I say, all the emails are also in this list, but obviously they are not as easy, friendly user as having all in one click. But I'm thinking loud now that a community of practice among SAICM focal points on gender is being done, as I explained in SAICM, but if it's more general, I guess it has to come through us, because if not, but all the SAICM focal points can contact each other through this page. I just sent the link and find them further.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jose. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd suggest that we include Yahya's comments and copy them from the chat, because he had a problem writing on the mural, that we copy Yahya's comments onto the mural, because we can make that into one PDF and send it to you. And then you also have all those comments should you want to look at them again. And we should just check the chat that everything is included. Okay, you feel free to add things if you wish, and we'll keep this open for a few days and then clean it up. And by which I mean, put it in little clusters, and then we make a PDF and share it around. Okay, now I need to look at the clock, and I think I'm handing it back to Anna to invite you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mino. And at the end of our webinar, I want to invite you to work with us on a gender responsive chemicals management. And therefore, we are very happy to receive feedback and additional suggestions for the Gender and Chemicals Roadmap and also the Gender and Chemicals Workbook. And of course, it would be absolutely great if you will try to implement the first steps of the roadmap in your countries, and also share your lessons learned, because the exchange on difficulties and successes and best practice examples helps, I would say, the whole SAICM community. And please also support the integration of gender in the SAICM Beyond 2020 process. We already heard that a mandate would be very great and a big step forward. And you will find more information and also a lot of policy recommendations at our website. Yeah, and this is gender-chemicals.org. So thank you so much for your participation today, and I look forward to staying in contact with you on gender and chemicals. If you have any question, please email me directly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Also, would you mind putting your email address again in the chat, just in case? Also from my side, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and making comments. Thanks very much to all who contributed, Anna, Jose, Susan, and Hans Christian, everybody who participated, everybody who listened, everybody who left a comment here in the chat, on the mural, whatever. To download the Gender and Chemicals Roadmap and Workbook and find more information, as Anna said, go to gender-chemicals.org. And we are happy and looking forward to hearing from you with experiences, critical remarks, suggestions, whatever it is. I'd like to close the official part of the meeting now, and we'll keep the Zoom meeting open for another 15 minutes or so, as long as it takes us to have a coffee and a chat. So if you wish to stay for some informal networking, please do. And if you have to leave now, have a nice day, a nice afternoon, a nice evening, and a good weekend. And most of all, stay healthy, and hope to see you again soon in the virtual space, and even more looking forward to seeing you again in person. Thank you very much. Thanks.